Hi, all. It's Jamie.
Jamie.
Hey, TJ. We ready to kick off with seeing who's here? Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
So, this is actually the World Cup. The semifinals are happening right now, Croatia and England. That's not why I'm late. But they're now going to go to a penalty kickoff. Just saying. We're going to miss it. But maybe TJ will watch it and give us an update while we're talking. So, TJ, some are muted, some are not muted, for people to be able to just tell us who's here.
This is Andrea with DHTV.
Hey, Andrea.
It looks like we have Becky, Norman, and Robin also.
Becky, you're there? I think you're self-muted.
Hello, this is Becky. I'm sorry, I stepped away for a moment since.
Hi, Becky. Thank you. Becky, if you're probably on your computer, so when you open up your line, I don't know if you heard. Are you still open?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. So it's not a deep echo. Okay, that works. Good. And who else is on the call? Looks like Robin is here from Prince George's. And Robin, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. So Andrew's here from Virginia State Housing and Community Development. Becky's here from the Norfolk region of Virginia. Robin's here from Prince George's County. I think we also have Kay. Are you here from Prince George's?
I am. Can you hear me?
Great. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
And Norman?
Yes, Norman from Prince George's County also.
Oh, look at that. We have a Prince George's County team here. I know that Tino from Orlando emailed and said he wasn't sure he could make it because of issues he was having with his car and other issues, actually. And I thought Margot was coming from Richmond, but I'm not sure where she is.
Margaret's been out of the office, so I'm not sure if she's on vacation or what, but I was at Homeward today, and she's out of the office this week.
She may be.
Marco's at a conference today. I was emailing with her earlier,
Yeah.
and she said she was out at a conference all day.
Yeah, right, because she was presenting, right, because these times are actually originally set up according to her time frame. But okay, that's great. And we have a few new people on the call, so we can back up to really summarizing what the call is about. TJ, you should give me the screen sharing, show my screen. Did you already do that? Okay. So I think everyone can see my screen, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. And so from Cloudburst, myself, Jamie Taylor, and Sarah Kahn are here, and TJ's our IT tech guy to make sure things go smoothly. And really what we set this community practice up for is to really support the sites that we're doing data work in, and to really support the cross-sharing of those sites for the use of the tools. Most sites, Norfolk and Richmond, have gotten the training in the data to action cycle training, and there's a lot of rich resources in there, and we want to both support the use and uptake of those resources, as well as the sharing of how sites are using their data tools. All the other, Prince George, you did have a version of the dashboard, a draft version, and then we have never cycled back to update that draft version. So Kay, if you want us to, I've tried to actually schedule this with Renee a number of times to continue that process, but if you want that to continue, you need to just email me about that. But it is not, does that make sense?
Sure, it sounds good.
So it is not just about our dashboards at all, though. This is really about how to use data and motivate its use into decision-making processes, of which everybody's doing in one way or another. And we were hoping to really have some good exchange on how people, from our last meeting, what we asked for people to go into the URL of the Data Action Cycle Playbook and pick out from there an exercise that you wanted to be using yourself to practice on. We recognized from Tino actually that the playbook URL had some glitches to it because of the way some of the documents were in Google Drive. Those have been fixed. And also people from Prince George's, I don't know if all of you even have this URL playbook that you even have looked at. You will get it, everyone will get it in the PowerPoint. Kate, could you just make sure I have Norman's email? I have your email and I have Robin's. I want to make sure that you're added to our list. And I'm not sure I have Norman's, but you have mine. Might be easiest that way.
Sure, I'll take care of that.
So this URL is in the PowerPoint that everyone's going to get. It's right here. Any update we make updates the URL directly here. So did anyone have any luck in looking through the playbook and picking out any tools that they were interested in to think about or practice with?
This is Becky from Hampton Roads, Virginia area, and I did have a chance to look at the tools, which I think were a lot of the same ones that you had taken us through, Jamie, when you did the data action cycle training with us a few months ago.
Right.
And so that really helped to have a foundation and have that experience of going through them in that interaction. Mm-hmm. And I think out of all the tools, the one that stood out for us right now is really the decision data case problems. Sorry, I'm reading my notes. The data case problems, because I think they're going to really help our community partners get familiar with the dashboards that are going to be available to them soon, and help them see not only, you know, we have this lovely dashboard on a website with pretty graphs and charts, but how do they actually start picking it apart and looking at the data and seeing what's available, and they can use that to then make those strategic funding decisions and setting the priorities of where we need to focus our efforts as a community. And that's something our partners have been talking about for a while, is really trying to focus on priority setting and making decisions based on good data. And I think some of the case examples will really help them start to think about how to do that and have a better understanding of that process.
Mm-hmm. Did you think about how you would take it? So, you know, take these links, which you can download, you know, once they're open, and change it. This is a PDF. We need to have this Word. Sarah, could you just make a note that we need to change the PDFs to Word? So the Word document makes it really simple, right? Because you can, these are just snapshots. Does everyone know the snippet tool, which is here? I don't know if you could see this screen where I'm actually picking the snippet tool. Do you see the snipping tool here? Can you guys see it? Like, this is the most incredible tool, but that when you have your own dashboard, you just find the dashboard that you want to take the picture of and use the snipping tool to just copy it, and then change up the questions accordingly. So if you want them to learn with your own dashboard,
We could customize
then
the tool. That's great.
yeah, but I need to get you the Word. You know, right now it's in a PDF, so it's not as usable. But Sarah, you're there, right? Sarah Khan. Jamie to Sarah. Sarah, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was on mute. I was hacking through my phone, but the computer let me mute. Yes, I am here, and we will make sure that the Word versions of those get out to folks and uploaded for sure.
Right, because they are to be adapted. That's the whole point of this, is to download these tools and use them all and adapt them. So the case problems are here. We strongly advise, if you're doing it, again, what we try to do is model the process. So matching, if your issue is family homelessness, matching the knowledge sharing brief around that topic area. A really good suggestion that came was to include local data in this brief. So this brief is national. It's still very up to date and very useful, but there's room to add your own local data around families into the brief. I'd advise you to keep it just 2 pages. You could take off any of this that you want to. This becomes yours, right? Once you download this is in Word, not PDF. So you just download it and you change it according to what is most useful for you. But having local data on the number of families in the Hampton, Norfolk area would be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're really doing is sharing some promising practices with people who do not know our literature at all and do not really understand what some of our findings have been. Also, if you want to add in additional findings, anybody, right, can add those in themselves, and or they could get a researcher from a university to do some work for them on that if they wanted to, or a college intern that's very, very good on resourcing. Like, I would make sure you follow, again, you always want to source, like this model, you always want to source where your data is coming from.
Sure.
And we'll be updating our briefs in the next few months again, because really the data and the research obviously is ongoing. So we'll have new versions up within the next couple months of these. But the idea for everyone on this call is to download these and adapt them according to what works for you. Mm-hmm. The prioritizing action is very cool, right, in the action plan worksheet. So the prioritizing action is pretty straightforward, and it's a nice exercise to help people drill down on collaboratively thinking through what is the first highest impact, high feasibility issue they want to work with. This action plan is, we see lots of these, and you can see there's even blank columns here, which I'm not sure why. Sarah, can we take note of that too? Because we've had a number of people touching this, and I'm not sure why these are blank, but this is just our example, and we want you to change it to what makes sense for you, right? How does this, what columns, like here, there should be a lead person should be identified. There should be some time frame identified in here. They were at some point in this, but not on this. So we have to change our action plan model, but we want you to actually take it and change it too accordingly, right? None of this is copyrighted. It's actually for this. So that's fantastic. If you have any issues with any of these materials, Becky and anyone else, both the downloading of them, we will get the Word documents up and running, if not this week, early next week. So we won't wait on that, of the data case problems. I know your dashboards won't be ready to actually utilizing that for a bit. So, but we'll definitely have that up by next week. But if you have any issues with any of this, let us know.
Great, thanks.
Anybody else have any time to explore the site? So I remember, Robin, you telling me you didn't have time, you're pretty maxed out. So for this data to action playbook, everyone else on the call, like Becky said, like they had the training where we came out, and we do the training when we're in the site to develop the final dashboards. It's in preparation of that. But you still can go through this data to action playbook and get a sense of what some of these different activities are that might be useful. But for Prince George's, it might be most helpful to wait for the training. It's really your call, Kay, how you want to do it with your team there.
Actually, just looking as you go through, I would like to go through and just look over it, and then we pick up from there.
Yeah, and exactly. You can set up a call with myself or Sarah also with your team to go through it because it'll be a bit of time before we actually do a training there. But yeah, if you want to do that, please feel free, because this is really the platform we're jumping off of. There's obviously many more materials to developing decision-making processes using data. The biggest thing we want to share, the biggest word, there's really 3 words for this training that underlie the foundation of it. And those 3 words are, 1, experiential. They're set up so that people, like Becky said, when they see their dashboards, to use the data use cases as exercises, it's because you want people to experience it themselves. So it's not didactic. It's really about setting up an opportunity for people to dive into data and in a non-threatening way, and also in a collective way, working in small groups, to really start to feel confident about asking questions of their data without being held responsible or criticized. So for many of us, moving into use of data is new, fairly new. And our theory of change is with the data tools we're developing with the dashboards and with data tools that you all have, the more people you can have that are interacting with it and get a better sense of how they can ask questions and be a part of that collective decision-making process with knowledge and information, the more accelerated the change process can be for ending and preventing homelessness. So that's our theory of change, and that's why we're putting a lot of time and effort into these training tools, as well as the data tools, as well as a leadership container framework. And Sarah's going to get a little bit to that in the next part, I think, on the importance of having a cross-sector leadership container who then determines how you're going to set goals, how you're going to work through all of these steps in this data to action cycle. So go ahead.
Oh, sorry, this is Becky again. I was just wondering if you could scroll back to the knowledge sharing resources.
Yeah.
I was just caught a bit of the USICH NOFA webinar, and they were talking about how the NOFA this year is emphasizing racial disparities and how we can track how we're serving populations color. And I was just wondering if you happen to have a knowledge brief on that would be actually really helpful.
Okay, we will. I mean, so NAEH also said that that's their number 1 priority, racial disparities, as is USICH, so they're connected. That is not what HUD's come out with as the number 1 priority, but there is a big report. I think it's called Spark. Is that right, Sarah? Spark. And we will, Sarah, would you mind making sure, like, we will also link this report out when we send out this PowerPoint? We'll link out the Spark report, and they have all the resources in the world about this here. So they have a lot. So you just really want to look at the research. You want to also look at all this information, but I wanted to tell you, like, can I just give, like, in my own, like, in the world we live in, racial disparities, right, has been driven by our policy culture over the decades. And we created the housing framework we now live in, right, over time. And that's the two resources that are really clear on that are Evicted, right? The Matthew Desmond's book, Evicted, here on Poverty and Profit in American City. And the other one that's incredible resource on this is Color of Law. And they show us the framework, a forgotten history of how our government actually segregated America. And these two resources are excellent resources framing for us to better understand the complexity of the racial injustice in our country. And that's directly correlated with the complexity of what it's going to take to make change happen. So I suggest that in embarking on going down, I mean, there are many things that can happen with staff training and the way sometimes, like I've heard in sites where rapid rehousing has actually been found to be provided to white families more than black families when all else is held constant. And there are ways to definitely look at those real data, like inside of your own service system, real data points. There's ways to do staff training on implicit bias and obviously hire people in, but don't try to go beyond your own circle of influence on this issue, because the roots of this issue are beyond any of us and the complexities. But to understand them and then to use your data, which we will do a knowledge brief on this. In our knowledge brief, we'll talk about how to ensure your analysis of the data, that you look at these. We can even give some case studies of how you would look at your data, because to me that's the only place you have locally to focus on, right?
Yeah, and based on this is Sarah, thanks for bringing this up, because I was actually just looking at some resources because I've gotten similar questions about this, and I know HUD is going to be releasing some information about what COCs and providers in the homeless system need to be thinking about in this regard. But when I looked at, things like the SPARK study that just came out, and it was essentially just a limited assessment of the SPARK communities, a mixed method study. And when I look at, like, the Alliance has come out with a couple of data briefs, but I think I felt like what was missing at this point, or I guess some of what you're saying, Jamie, is what are those concrete things that are within our realm of influence and
right.
part of our priorities as homeless service providers, because there's a lot of great information about the influence of other systems and systemic racism across all of our systems, and that needs for upstream intervention. But it's also then thinking about understanding all this data. What does that mean within our own system, and what can we do within our own programs, which is, I think, the challenge at this point. And how do we look at outcomes on disparities and then translate that into meaningful change for our own programs, knowing that we're not going to solve systemic racism across the board. So, yeah, I think thank you for bringing that up, and I think it'll be a good knowledge brief for us to develop for sure.
Right, and we will stick with what can be done locally with data to identify and support, and some of these practices, like this is clearly workforce development issues that go beyond just staff training. But anyway, we're not going to be as lofty as all this. But it doesn't mean it's not a great thing. But also, as we go forward, we become the messengers out there. And just to be careful, I do recommend the Color of Law and Evicted. I mean, Matthew Desmond has a lot of credibility now in his work, and just have some. If you're going forth on this issue, also have some background on the complexities of how we got here. And that's what I would recommend.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
One of the things we do with this is also talk about what else is happening in the literature. That we with every call we're sharing an update on a literature article that we found ourselves. Any one of us that is most helpful in this work that we're all doing. So today's article, I'm going to actually let Sarah talk about and let Sarah take over the next half hour because I have to go to another call, which I apologize. It's on this other study targeting frequent utilizers in Chicago, and I still can't watch. TJ, what happened actually in World Cup? Did you actually see any update? Who won, Croatia or England?
I'm not sure, Jamie.
TJ. All right. So I have to go find out this important fact. I'm a Croatia fan because they beat Russia. And I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, and I hope to see everyone in our third upcoming community of practice. These are really valuable. We're setting the seeds. We'll open them up again in September to a larger group for ongoing connections, so it's not over after this third one. But thank you, everyone, for being here. And Kay, follow up with a time we can talk about how we can support Prince George's and catching up on this side. So thanks all, and here's Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
Cool. Can you make me the presenter, TJ? While TJ is doing that, I just want to ask, so it sounds like we have Robin, Kay, and Norman. You all are from Prince George's. I just want to see if I got this right. And then Becky, you're from Norfolk, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and Andrea, you're in Virginia as well, right? Did I get that wrong?
I think Andrea said she had to leave at 4:30 as well.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
I can answer though. Yes, Andrea's with the state DHCD. She's with the Balance of State Continuum of Care in Virginia. She's a great partner.
Okay. Great. I know Andrea. And then Robin, you're with George as well. Perfect. Just trying to get a sense of who's left on the call since it's a little bit of
Jamie,
a
we have Renee too. I think she might have joined a little bit after the start.
Oh, that's too. Hey, Renee. And Renee, are you from Prince George's County as well?
She is.
I think you might be on mute. Oh, sorry, Norman. Did you say she is?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great.
We're talking about Renee Pope. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, let me go ahead here. And for those of you that I didn't get to meet during our last session, my name's Sarah Khan. I work with Jamie here at Cloudburst as a technical assistance provider, largely just focused on, supporting communities to look at local data in order to drive systems change and performance improvements at the local level, and have been working with Jamie on some of the data integration initiatives that you all have been a part of. So it's great to be working with all of you. So yeah, we wanted to try to, all of us spend a lot of time, trying to make the case to policymakers for joint policy making around homelessness and joint commitment to preventing and ending homelessness across systems. And so in each of these sessions, we've wanted to highlight different pieces of new research. This is one that I'll send a link to that I just saw about 5 minutes before joining the call. So we'll all have to dig into it together after the call. But it's essentially a summary of the health and housing literature to illustrate sort of the really important relationship between health and housing and the bidirectional impacts. And the way that those impacts happen through 4 different pathways. So the way that housing stability impacts health outcomes and healthcare costs, the way that housing, the quality and the safety of our housing has an impact, the way that housing affordability has an impact, and the way that the environments and neighborhoods in which we live have an impact. So this is definitely a must read for folks that are kind of working with, leaders from the health system and the housing system to try to drive, obviously greater coordination, but also to leverage some of the data integration initiatives that are happening now use that information to create change and to ensure that we're preventing homelessness and creating more stable housing opportunities for people, which then obviously has the impact of reducing costs and greater health outcomes and all of those things. So it's just a really good summary. So I'll send out the link to all of you after the call. So for the second part of the chat, we wanted to, and my screen is getting a little bit stuck right now. I first should say, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
You can?
Yeah.
Yes.
Why then am I not able to? Okay, I don't know why. I'll try to work that out. So we're going to talk about establishing a performance management program and strategies for really building a performance culture within our COC. And I see that there's a typo on this slide, culturing. So when I say performance management program out loud, that sounds really dry and business-like, which I hope that the discussion isn't like that as well. But I think what we're really talking about is becoming more performance driven and paying attention to outcomes and the impacts of our programs on people's lives, so that we can, continue to respond better and to do more with the resources that we have. So I'm saying that because I think there's a human element to all of this. When we start talking about performance management, that gets lost and is important to, I think, establish as we start talking about, why we measure performance and manage performance within our communities. So the reason that we're having this discussion is to really sort of share a framework for establishing a performance management program at the local level. And when we say performance management, what we're really talking about is this continuous process of measuring and evaluating outcomes and using that information to design and implement improvement strategies. So I know a lot of you, so there's now just 2 communities represented, and I know within those communities, you all are leading on certain aspects of performance management. So this is really an opportunity to kind of draw on those experiences with kind of building a performance culture within your community, but also to talk about lessons learned from others' communities. The other purpose is to support you in kind of formalizing a performance management program or building on the success of an existing performance program within your community. And we've created sort of a template performance management plan that we want to share with all of you. And this is because what we've learned, I think, from communities is that the actual process of developing a thing that stakeholders come together to develop together to identify performance goals and to set out performance expectations together and to write those things down and assign responsibility feels like it leads to greater action and greater commitment from all of those stakeholders involved. And so the plan, the template plan that we have today is to help facilitate that process, but it's also to kind of give you homework. So, at the end, we'll talk about what we want to do between now and the next session, but part of the homework is thinking about, do you already have a performance management plan in place? If so, can you come and share that with the group and talk about some of your experiences in implementing that plan? If you don't, then can you use this plan as an opportunity to kind of kickstart conversations on the local level about how you would fill some of that out or establish that kind of program in your community? So before I get started, I kind of just want to ask you, so besides the fact that HUD says we have to measure performance, are you all measuring performance, and why is that important? Why is measuring performance important to you and important to your community? What are some of the reasons that you measure performance?
So basically, we do it because That's what we're getting paid to do, and that's what HUD wants us to do. So in other words, to get the funding, that's what we do.
Yep. Yep. So there's a compliance aspect of measuring performance,
Right.
in order to make our funders happy and to get more money.
Well, but not only to make them happy, but for me, at least, I want to feel proud in what I do deliver is to the best of my ability, and it makes sense.
And so it sounds like also to kind of demonstrate results and demonstrate.
Right, but that takes a lot of work to do it, and so the impression that I'm getting what y'all are trying to do, and maybe I might be on the wrong track, but this data to action call, because even the exercise says you need to be in a group. So we need to, in Prince George's, we need to establish who that group is. And maybe the group is Kay, Renee, and myself and Norma, and then because they've been attending the, or they may know a little bit more about this data to action, because the first time I came in on the phone call was the other day about this piece, but I know that y'all were working with us to give out all of those nice little pretty charts, as y'all call them, us to look at data. But I mean, in Service Point, there's plenty of charts. And you can develop charts, so that's not all that hard. But I guess my key is, where does the upper administration, what do they want from us? And then let's see if we can deliver, because we might can deliver it without going through, to me right now, all of these exercises, because time is very valuable. But I mean, I hear you, and and I want to be, I guess, a good stewardess and participate, but I want to participate knowing that this is going somewhere, and where are we going, and what do we want as a group? Because
So this is Kay. I might offer a different perspective.
Okay.
So I think that you have to prioritize, how you're going to do performance measurement, and I think that it's an opportunity to take the great amounts of data that we do have and figure out how to organize it so that it, one, makes sense when you look at it, and it tells your story about how your programs are running and operating, and that you set it up in a way that you can determine the points in time or the points in the service where maybe you're having some struggles, or there might be some process improvement that may need to be done to make things a little bit more efficient. And then all of that ties into what the consumer or customer experience is, hopefully, and that you're making improvements not just because administration wants it or HUD wants it, but because we want to make the service better and more accessible and more applicable to the customer, and that hopefully their outcomes will improve. But when I think of performance measurement, those are the things that guide my direction in the projects that I work on.
That's great. Yeah, so I guess there's a lot of, I think I heard both of you talk about a lot of different levels of uses. Like, we measure performance to assess what's happening at the project level, at the system level, identify what's working, what's not working. That information can help you then figure out, like, what are the solutions? Like, how do we use that information to then make decisions that drive system improvements, whether it's improvements at the project level, improvements at the system level. And how do we then, I guess another thing I heard too is, like, we can use that information to demonstrate what's working well, and generally just make better informed decisions. I also hear the point of making this a little bit more concrete for folks. So I think let's move into that, because I think that's what we want to do today by providing you and walking through a template that can be used in your community. And before I do that, I just want to briefly touch on these core steps to kind of establishing a performance management program. And when I say that, it's just really about what is your local process and formal process for measuring and evaluating outcomes. And so as I walk through these, it would be great to hear lessons and hurdles that you've had when you've implemented these steps in your program so that we can kind of bring these strategies to life and learn kind of what works and what doesn't work when you're formalizing this process at the local level. But these are key steps that that we're talking about, because these are the things when I look at communities that I've worked with that have had success in using performance data to drive improvements. This is what's happening on the ground in those communities. So this is sort of a similar process that many communities have taken. And I feel like these communities on the call today, both of you have probably taken some variation of these steps as well. And the first is, I think what I heard was, establishing a group, right? Well, that's number one. You're exactly right. The first is thinking about who are those performance champions? Who's going to oversee looking at performance data? Who's going to drive performance improvement at the local level? And who's going to evaluate and monitor that data? So that might be one person. That might be one group, or it might be multiple groups. But the key is that communities really kind of formally assign responsibility to that group to have oversight over some of those really important aspects of performance management. Do you all have performance committees in place right now, or a leadership group that's responsible for looking at performance data and making decisions about improvement strategies?
So this is Kay with Prince George's, and I think that the way that, so the answer is yes, but
yeah.
Our homeless programs operates a little bit differently than the rest of the agency. I have an actual division where we actually do performance measurement. We do the data and provide the reports, and so we have had discussions about how we bring the homeless and house services under that same framework. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm participating in this. Resources are always a challenge, in terms of how you get the work done and where it sits. So, I don't bring that up to say that, to whine. I bring it up to really talk about, to highlight the importance of having the discussion for allocating the resource for this type of work, that I continually, working with my partners in other programs to say, when you apply for grants, we've got to include this type of position to do this type of work. So we're still kind of working out. I do think that they do have another, they have Robin and Norman and the POC who do look at their data, because they use their data on a regular, and they can speak to how they do that. But it's not integrated with the rest of the way the department operates.
Okay. Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. I've done a lot of reflecting on this month, because we've done a lot of work in some communities that we're working in to help establish this leadership container, that this group that's actually kind of responsible for setting the priorities, reviewing the data, and kind of driving the change to achieve those goals that are established. And in a community that I've been working in recently, they've just hired a person to actually be responsible for coordinating that effort, and it seems to be like a really key best practice, like you described, like a resource that can drive that change, and to coordinate that group of people who's overseeing performance seems to be a really kind of key condition for driving things forward at a good pace when it comes to looking at data and then acting on the data. So you need the leaders at the table who are going to look at the data, but then you need a coordinator or someone to really own the group and to get the group in order, which takes a resource, right? And not all communities are going to be able to to have that, but if there is a person that can be responsible for moving those agendas forward and moving that group to decisions, that seems to be really important. That's really important best practice for making progress. Because when I reflect on communities that haven't established that leadership group with a person who's driving it forward, then it feels to halt progress, I think. So that's a good point. So number 2 is figuring out what are the best measures of success. So again, that's based on system priorities, project priorities, and I'll talk a little bit about this when I show you the template. But at the system level, obviously, the things that you want to measure are very aligned with your priorities as a community. At the project level, the things that you want to measure are very aligned with the role of that project, right? So if it's an outreach project, then outreach programs are going to have potentially a different set of key measures that are looked at than a rapid rehousing program. Yes, an outreach program is concerned with moving people into permanent housing, but an outreach project at the system level, you might want to also assess, are outreach projects able to move people into safe housing, which might not always be permanent housing. So again, it's these nuanced issues about thinking about what are the role and goals of different project types, and then what measures should we be looking at that are aligned with those goals. For example, if it's a rapid rehousing program, obviously the time it takes from enrollment to move in is critically important. So because the goal of the program is to get people into housing as quickly as possible. So just thinking about really formalizing what are the best things that we want to be looking at and measuring as a community. Step 3 is establishing those performance goals and benchmarks. So after determining what to measure, looking at where are we today on each of those measures, what's our baseline data, and where do we want to be? What are our performance goals for each of those measures? And to use that information to then set targets. So for example, some communities who have developed performance plans have said, look, we want to set an annual goal for getting here on this measure, right? So length of time homeless among families is really important, let's say. And so, you know, that community might look and say, when we look at our baseline, we have an average length of stay in emergency shelter of 180 days, let's say. But, you know, after year 1, we want to get that down to 60 days. So that's our goal. And then thinking about targets, the community might say each quarter, we want to look at length of time homeless among families to assess whether or not we're getting closer to our goal. So we're going to set targets for each quarter to show how we want to reduce length of stay to get to that year 1 goal. So that's just an example of how communities are thinking about looking at data and looking at targets. A big part of this is also assessing data quality. So one thing I'll send you is a resource that just kind of shows how you can look at data quality in relation to system performance measures as well. Step 4 is developing a performance management plan. So again, I will walk through that in a minute. But again, it's really wanting to provide you with an opportunity to look at a template plan that can be adapted and can be used as an opportunity to kind of dig in with local stakeholders to look at some of these key steps. Step 5 is then evaluating and looking and communicating performance results year-round. So communities that have done a good job of building a stronger kind of performance culture tend to not just think of looking at reviewing performance at NOFA time, but build in a strategy for looking at and diagnosing performance year-round. So diagnosing performance, looking at the what are the performance results, telling us why, starting to explore what's happening in our community, what are factors that are influencing those performance results, and then based on that investigation, how can we translate those results into solutions and change? So our communities, some communities do that quarterly, some communities do that biannually, some communities just do that annually at NOFA time. Do you all look at performance data throughout the year at all?
Yes.
Yep. How often are you all looking at the performance data currently?
Well, it just depends on what reporting is coming out. So right now we're
Okay.
being focused in on ESG because it's the annual report. It's time for it to be due. So we're looking
Yeah.
at those providers, where the error is lying, how can we correct it, how can we get the information out to them so that they can review their data and look it up. We do it also at AHAR Town, which I think is going to be changed to, what is it, LS? So they're going to
LSA.
have a new name for it. So, about a month into all of that, I mean, by the time you get finished with one data processing or reporting tool, it's time for the next one. So now you're back up to what do we do now? So we try quarterly to get from our permanent supportive housing people their client list, because they're not on the same mandate as those agencies that we actually have contracts with. So, if you would supply the client list so that we can go in and look at it, because their clients don't move around a whole lot. A lot of times they'll have clients that haven't dismissed from the program that have, or they'll have clients that who have come into the program that they haven't put the data in yet. So, it's a lot of just trying to get people to do that alone is enough work.
Yeah.
And making sure that the entries and exit dates and times are conducive before they start rendering the services. Because if they're not, then the services are not going to fall within the right parameter between that entry and exit worksheet. So,
I think you bring up a really good point that communities, COCs, have a slew of intense responsibilities right now, and measuring performance and doing data reporting is just one of those things. And I think it kind of speaks to then the critical importance of thinking about those leadership groups and potentially parsing out the work, right? So it sounds like you are spending a lot of time on data quality, data reporting, looking at the data, getting the data ready, evaluating the data. So potentially it's important to carve out another group of people that then has responsibility for what are you going to do with that data, and making sure that the responsibilities are parsed out, right? And getting those groups in place.
That's all I'm trying to say. Because you can't do them both. I mean, it's almost impossible. I mean, I could, like you say, I could spin this wheel around, but then we won't be getting anything out to the providers or the funders. Because you can't even upload an APR if you got an error on it.
Yeah.
I mean, and Norman and I can contest. I mean, we got one provider that was having a problem. They weren't even going to be able to load up their data, which was under our department. So we had to come up with a solution in order to get that ready. So and I do appreciate what Kay has said, and I definitely appreciate what she's doing on her end for the department. And I think that Kay and probably Renee are having a conversation among what they would like to do. That just might need to be something that need to be bounced a little bit further down, here too as well, so that the more I understand what they're looking for or what they want, then at least give us the opportunity to provide. But I don't even know that. You know what I'm saying? So
one of the things I would offer is that what's important to this performance management program is communication at all levels, and not to diminish the role of the data gathering, cleansing, evaluation role, and then how that is different from creating your reports and your larger reports, and like you said, what to do with it. And this is not unique just to this program. We've had this on other programs or projects that I've worked on as well. I know we have time, but I wanted to get that in there.
Thank you. Yeah, and so that's a good point. So let's move to this template, because I think it talks about a lot of the things that you were talking about. This is what we're going to send out right after the call that might help think about some of this and how to implement this in your community. So this is the template. It can be adapted to meet your needs, but what it says is it's a process for as a community to think about performance roles and responsibilities, right? So to think about who are those people that are going to be responsible for analyzing the data, for reviewing the data, for leading performance improvement strategies, but also, like you just said, for communicating the data, which is equally important. With providers, I'm doing this in vivo. Next is performance measures, goals, quarterly benchmarks, and I've included at the bottom of this some links to other communities who I've ran across certain performance management plans that have similar sort of tables where it's an opportunity to think about in a very structured way at the project level and at the system level, what are our goals? What are the things we're measuring? What are our goals? And how do we calculate those measures so there's some transparency around those things? And then what is our evaluation schedule? So again, how often can we reasonably pull the data, right? And really laying out, this is our evaluation schedule for if we're going to do it quarterly or biannually, stating that and setting out some timelines for when that's going to happen. A communications plan, right, which I just heard you talk about. Who is actually going to get the data? How are you going to send the data out? Who's the audience for that data? What data is going to be shared back out to providers or publicly? What's the mode of communication? Is that going to be through email, through the website, through COC meetings or board meetings? And then how often is that data going to be shared? And actually, how is the data going to be visualized, right? Are you going to send tables or dashboard views? But thinking about that communications plan, and in 1 minute, performance improvement planning and community implementation strategies, which I wanted to talk about more, but we can talk about it at the next meeting after you all get a chance to dig into this a little bit. So that's the template. It's got all of this is kind of written in to give you ideas for how you would fill some of this out. So what I want to do as homework, just in our last minute, I'm going to send you some relevant resources that will help you to fill some of this out or to get you thinking about some of these elements in the implementation phase. For homework, I want you to think about, do you already have a performance management program sort of plan in place? And if so, can you bring that and help us learn from your experience in developing and implementing that plan? If you don't, can you use this plan to kickstart the conversation and create a plan of your own? And then can you come prepared to talk about your experiences in starting those discussions at the local level? Wouldn't expect you to be starting from square one and come back with a fully completed plan, but would love to hear about whether or not this kickstarted some conversations at the local level and your experiences in doing that. So I will send you that template. There's some other resources here that you can look at. I'll also send out that research report that we just talked about. And the next session is on August 1st. With that said, are there any other questions that people have before we let you all go 1 minute after 5? Okay, thanks. And once you get the materials, please feel free to reach out to me directly if you have questions about the template or want to talk through some of those areas in a little bit more detail. And we'll look forward to talking to you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.